Chapter 1. Tracking Today. Some Modern Applications. People's first comment, or at least their first thoughts, when they hear an account of an incident where tracking has been employed is something along the lines of, "How unusual." It is as if the skills associated with trackers and tracking had died out long ago, and the disciplines had no relevance to modern life. My aim is to dispel this misconception and to open up the benefits of tracking to a much wider audience. At the moment, there are, it seems, only two groups who are aware of the usefulness of the tracker's knowledge in modern society. First, there are the specialist military units who have kept the skills alive despite great resistance from some quarters of the military establishment. And second, there are the rural police forces who have brought in trackers, usually ex-military, on a case-by-case basis, but who rarely have a formal training program for their own trackers. In my opinion, this is a sad underutilization of a wealth of knowledge that our ancestors have built up over millennia. I believe that tracking can play a wide and valuable role in modern society. In this new edition, there is a chapter devoted to the digital age, chapter 26, and how it enhances the value of the tracker as opposed to making the tracker skills redundant. A historical perspective. The tracking skill initially developed because of man's desire for meat. Naturally weaker than most of his prey, and having only primitive weapons, man was forced to use other skills. He had to observe the areas frequented by and the habitats of the animals and birds he intended catching for food. This basic feature is reflected even today in that some of the best game trackers in the world come from the more remote areas where they live a very unsophisticated existence close to nature. Often their way of life, customs, and social habits are dominated by the game chase and the after-catch celebrations. A classic example of this hunting-centered lifestyle was the Great Plains Indians of North America. They migrated with the game herds that not only provided them with food, but also clothing, ornaments, tools, shelter, and fuel. It is not surprising that their dances and their spiritual life were fashioned around the buffalo and the other animals that supported them. This is just one example of how fundamental hunting and therefore tracking are to mankind. Even after man had domesticated animals and cultivated the land, tracking did not become redundant. It was a skill in his arsenal when warring against other tribes. He soon found that even with inferior numbers and weapons, by employing stealth, cunning, surprise, and superior knowledge of bushcraft, he was able to overcome and defeat his victims. Reprisals and revenge naturally followed, and so tracking and scouting skills were firmly established in warfare. The vast majority of the civilian population and even military leaders and police chiefs are unaware of the potential use of trained trackers, but with some imagination it's not difficult to envisage tracking many uses. Law enforcement agencies. Tracking with most law enforcement agencies is orientated primarily towards scent tracking, employing highly trained tracker dogs. Their work ranges from the pursuit of law-breaking fugitives to the detection of explosives and narcotics. The U.S. Border Patrol is but one enforcement agency that currently employs these tracking techniques in its never-ending task of stopping illegal entry into the United States. Scent tracking is established as a useful tool, but the same enthusiasm has not yet extended to visual tracking, where expertise could equally well be used. To limit the use of tracking to scent tracking is to impose a severe limitation. The visual tracker can be especially useful in rural areas. Speaking from experience of having trained an anti-poaching unit, APU, in Botswana, I know how useful and lethal visual trackers can be, as do the unfortunate Zimbabwean poachers who tried to outrun and outshoot our APU. In my opinion, there are two areas in which visual trackers should be involved with police work. First, there should be a pool of federally certified trackers who are on call to local law enforcement, rather like interpreters are on call. And second, they have a briefing role to explain to senior officers and applications of visual tracking and to make all officers aware of the importance of preserving the sign. See Chapter 2 for the tracker. The military recently Military tracking provides many examples of the application of this ancient skill. It is the man tracking man, either to gain information or to kill him. The low-intensity counterinsurgency wars of the post-colonial era provide many examples of the employment of trackers. It is such a rich and varied field that I have devoted a whole chapter to it. See Chapter 18. But even here, once the conflicts have been resolved, the tracking units are usually disbanded and the men reassigned, thus dispersing and eventually losing the pool of skill. The New Zealand SAS is one unit that has had the foresight to keep tracking skills as an essential component of the military curriculum. The benefits of preserving the knowledge and skills of a tracker within a military establishment are twofold. First, the training that a tracker undergoes can be seen as honing the skills that any infantry soldier needs: observation, movement, and concealment. And secondly, the skills are ready for immediate utilization by the higher commands in such remote area emergency situations as search and rescue of downed pilots, as in Iraq or Bosnia, when the TAC-B, the emergency location beacon carried by aircrew, may have been lost, damaged, stolen, or removed if the aircrew have been captured, or it simply ran out of power. Cave and mountain rescue. Rescue organizations are often called upon to locate missing persons. Unfortunately, they possess limited or no knowledge of the arts of tracking. Consequently, a great deal of sign, see Chapter 2, is normally obliterated by the first person on the scene, making it almost impossible for any immediate pursuit by trained trackers. Vital time is wasted and the results can be tragic. Conservationists. From the nature enthusiast, whether professional paid conservation officer or the unpaid amateur working for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, RSPB, there is a great benefit to be had from a proper grounding in tracking. With a fuller understanding of what is happening in a particular environment, they gain a greater satisfaction from their pursuits, and professionals are better placed to protect species and encourage the development of wildlife. Gamekeepers. As any professional gamekeeper knows, he is now protecting a very valuable asset for his employer. Land and livestock are under threat from ruthless, well-organized gangs, both local and, perhaps more importantly, from out of area. These criminals do not enter a region on a whim. They plan their raids with precision because they know the profits to be gained are huge. The knowledge that a trained tracker could elicit from studying the areas either where raids have taken place or, even better, where the reconnaissance and preparation for a raid have taken place, would be an invaluable weapon in anti-poaching units' armory. This is not just of relevance to the African government trying to protect its stock of rhino, but also to the Yorkshire or Scottish gamekeeper trying to preserve stocks of pheasants and salmon. A gamekeeper's use of tracking skills is not confined to anti-poaching activities. They can also be used to protect their charges from other wildlife predators. To catch, trap, shoot, or control the wildlife in their area of operation, they must first be able to locate and identify the areas frequented by those animals. Farmers and livestock owners. The activities of rustlers may conjure up romantic images of the Wild West, but to the Welsh sheep farmer or the private zoo owner who has a rare species stolen, rustling is simply a matter of common theft. Often, though, the environment in which these crimes take place is ideally suited to the effective deployment of a tracker, if the owners are aware and do not foul the sign. Country recreationalists. Any person who is interested in the countryside is seeing only a fraction of life around him if he hasn't got the tracker's awareness of the observation of detail. This knowledge can enhance a country-based hobby beyond belief. It is the difference between an illiterate and a literate person standing in front of a signpost. Orienteers, field walkers, fishermen, hunters, botanists, and anyone with a love of or interest in nature will find that their enjoyment and knowledge increase tremendously. Educators. For the adult who has responsibilities for the personal development of the young and for the educator in general, there is profound value in the study of tracking. It may seem paradoxical that a topic so rarely associated with warlike activities should be proposed as being of use to the teacher in any liberal democracy, but I'm sure the following observations will banish any preconceived notions. Observation, memory, analysis, and deduction are all fundamental mental operations that need to be cultivated in the young mind. and they also happen to be the basis of the tracker's mental process. What better way to develop these processes than in an educationally fun environment for groups of all ages? I see this being extremely efficacious with children who have not responded well in more formal teaching setting, or as an adjunct to an outdoor pursuits environment, as well as developing rational skills. Emotional traits inculcated by tracker training are also of great worth. Patience, determination, concentration, and appreciation and respect for the countryside and its wildlife. See Chapter 5 for a full exposition of the qualities of a tracker, and Chapter 17 for the material specific for the teacher and instructor. The educational value of tracking should not be underestimated, and there is a good argument for introducing tracking into any school syllabus for outdoor pursuits. One can see the development of a tracker as progress through several stages. First of all, he must cultivate his powers of observation and attention to detail. Then he must develop and practice his memory and deduction. Along with these skills, habits of perseverance and patience are being encouraged. I'm sure that many in the armed forces, the police, and the cave and mountain rescue services will find invaluable and possibly life-saving lessons in this book. For other groups, such as conservationists, ornithologists, and country sportsmen and women, this book will enhance their understanding and enjoyment of their pastimes. And finally, for the young person, I hope this book fosters an interest in the countryside, conservation, and nature, just as the following incident did for me when I was lucky enough to have it explained by the gamekeeper. We were out walking one winter's morning when he pointed where a rabbit had been crouching in the snow. There was a round patch about 5 by 9 inches. Then he showed me how the rabbit must have been startled as it accelerated suddenly. The hind feet were ahead of the forefeet within a few paces. Then the rabbit's path became erratic. It was trying to escape, but there were no other tracks. Then he showed me a few spots of blood. The rabbit had been attacked, but by a hunter that left no track. To a 6-year-old, this was a mystery, obvious when the gamekeeper told me about hawks and owls. We then found a great deal more blood, and then the remains of the rabbit. The gamekeeper showed me the prints of the bird of prey in the snow by the rabbit's carcass. He was just about to outline in the snow the difference between a hawk's print and an owl's when the rabbit's attacker came swooping in to finish its meal and prove the gamekeeper right. The sort of incident you never forget.